Have you ever craved a space that just felt so perfectly aligned with your values, so incredibly welcoming and protective, that you actively chose to ignore the, like, tiny red flags popping up around you?
Oh, I think we all have to some degree.
Right. I mean, just imagine spending your whole life being judged and then suddenly finding a group of people who finally truly understand you. They celebrate the exact things the rest of the world has always criticized you for.
Yeah, you would want to hold on to that feeling forever.
Exactly. Even if, the demands of that group started to feel a little overwhelming or the leadership started acting a little strange.
Well, we are fundamentally hardwired to seek belonging, right? Especially when we've been historically denied it by the broader culture.
Oh, for sure.
That incredibly powerful, almost desperate desire for sanctuary. It isn't a character flaw. It is a profound human vulnerability. And the sources we are looking at today reveal just how efficiently that specific vulnerability can be targeted, mapped out, and exploited by someone who knows exactly what they are doing.
Yeah. And that brings us to our focus today. We are taking a deep dive into an article excerpt titled Paradise Lost: The Coercive Cost of Manufactured Empowerment. And it's this brilliant breakdown of the true crime docuseries Big Girls Wanted, Escaping Paradise.
It really is a fascinating read.
It is. But our mission today is not just to recap a true crime story. We are dissecting the architecture of modern manipulation. We are going to look at how vulnerable communities are drawn in, how the actual language of social justice can be weaponized into this invisible cage, and what it genuinely takes to build spaces that are actually safe.
Which is such an important conversation to have right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how this community completely collapsed, we really have to understand the incredibly magnetic promise that drew people there in the first place.
Right. So the community was called Pearadise, and it was established by a man named Stefan Wilhelmi.
Hmm.
Its core promise was, well, it was nothing short of a tailor-made utopia. Paradise was built specifically for plus-size women.
And they marketed it pretty aggressively,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, they marketed it as a physical and digital sanctuary grounded entirely in body positivity, unconditional acceptance, and sisterhood. It was designed to be the ultimate counter-narrative to mainstream societal standards.
I mean, if you are a plus-size woman who has spent a lifetime navigating a society that constantly tells you that you need to change or that you take up too much space, finding a place like Paradise must have felt like an absolute miracle.
Whoa, completely. It must have felt like finally exhaling.
Right. Wilhelmi wasn't just offering a living arrangement. He was offering an alternate reality where these women were placed at the very center of the universe, like where their bodies were inherently perfect.
But, the documentary painstakingly juxtaposes that initial beautiful promise with a reality that is just deeply disturbing.
Yeah, the tonal shift is wild.
It really is. Survivors who eventually escaped Paradise came forward with a barrage of allegations. We're talking severe assault, systemic coercion, fetishization, psychological manipulation, and really textbook cult-like behavior.
The gap between the marketing brochure and the lived reality of Paradise is just staggering to me.
Well, Wilhelmi recognized that the societal isolation these women experienced was a raw nerve. He built a community that ostensibly acted as a soothing balm for that specific pain.
Right.
But once he had them inside the community, the dynamic shifted entirely. The sanctuary became a panopticon.
I was trying to wrap my head around how someone gets caught in that gap without realizing the doors are locking behind them. And I kept thinking about this analogy.
Okay, what is it?
Imagine you've been wandering through a desert for weeks. You're dying of thirst, completely parched, blistered by the sun, just entirely isolated.
Sounds awful.
Right. And suddenly you stumble upon an oasis. There's a pool of cool, clear water. When you are dying of thirst, you aren't going to pull out a chemistry kit to inspect that water for poison. You aren't going to look for the catch. You were just desperate to survive.
That makes total sense.
That initial promise of sanctuary in Paradise was, it was the water in the desert.
The insidious thing about that oasis, though, is that the poison isn't added all at once.
Right. It's gradual.
Exactly. The architect of that sanctuary adds it slowly, like one drop a day. By the time the water starts to taste bitter, the individual is already completely dependent on it.
Wow. Yeah.
When a demographic is systematically starved of validation and respect in the broader culture, their threshold for accepting a quote-unquote savior fundamentally changes.
Because they're just so hungry for basic respect.
Yes. The desire for a safe space becomes this psychological blind spot. It makes individuals highly susceptible to coercive control because the theoretical cost of leaving the community feels so high.
The fear of going back out into that judgmental, isolating desert feels infinitely worse than enduring whatever uncomfortable compromises are being demanded inside the oasis.
Exactly. The fear of losing that manufactured sanctuary becomes the primary mechanism that keeps them trapped.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the abuse didn't look like traditional, overtly hostile control. Wilhelmy wasn't walking around acting like a cartoon villain.
No, not at all. If he had been, people would have just left.
Right. Instead, the abuse was heavily camouflaged. But I'm genuinely confused by the mechanics of this. Like, how do you camouflage severe psychological manipulation and assault from a group of smart, modern women who are actively seeking liberation?
What's fascinating here is that they did it by using the very words those women used to define their liberation.
Wait, really? Like they use their own terminology?
Yeah, the documentary's analysis reveals how Wilhelmy and the inner circle of Pearadise actively weaponized progressive language. They co-opted the vocabulary of empowerment.
Oh, wow.
Words like liberation, body positivity, unconditional acceptance, and safe space. They took the exact terminology designed by civil rights and social justice movements to free marginalized people, and they repurposed it to mask harmful coercive dynamics.
That is terrifying. The predator in this scenario is literally wearing the clothing of a social justice advocate.
It is incredibly deceptive.
I mean, if someone in a position of power says to you, I need to isolate you from your family because they are toxic to your body liberation, they're using your own value system against you.
Precisely.
How does a person inside that bubble even begin to realize they are being manipulated when the manipulation sounds exactly like a therapy session?
Well, the psychological process at play here is known as concept creep, combined with semantic manipulation.
Concept creep. Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. Concept creep happens when a clinical or academic term slowly expands its definition until it encompasses entirely different behaviors.
Oh, got it.
In high-control groups like Pearadise, the leader acts as the sole dictionary. Wilhelmy redefined what safe meant.
So safe didn't actually mean safe anymore.
Right. Safe no longer meant freedom from physical or psychological harm. Safe was redefined to mean compliant with Stefan's vision.
Unbelievable.
So if a woman questioned his authority, she wasn't expressing a valid concern. She was accused of succumbing to internalized fat phobia or bringing toxic energy into a protected space.
It's a complete inversion of reality. You literally can't argue back, because the moment you do, you are labeled as the oppressor of the safe space.
Exactly. By adopting the right vocabulary, a leader, or, an online influencer, quickly gains unearned trust and unquestioned authority.
Because it sounds so right.
The human brain uses language as a shortcut for alignment. If someone speaks the language of your liberation, your brain automatically assumes their intentions align with your liberation.
That is such a huge blind spot for us.
The documentary provides a crucial, chilling lesson for the modern era. Predators learn the vocabulary of the vulnerable because it is the most efficient key to bypassing their critical defenses.
They figured out the cheat codes to trust.
They really did. They effectively hijacked the momentum and the trust of a broader social movement to exert interpersonal, unregulated control.
And the scariest part is how scalable this tactic is today. Like, we aren't just talking about a remote compound hidden deep in the woods where nobody has cell service.
Far from it.
Pearadise was highly visible. It was highly documented. It was constantly connected to the internet. We have the perspective of photojournalist Emily Kask, who initially gained access to document life inside the compound.
She provided a literal lens into this world.
Yeah, she really did. But the real explosion, like the thing that finally broke the dam, didn't happen through traditional journalism. It happened on TikTok.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are looking at the messy, unregulated realities of modern exploitation. Abuse today unfolds in what we call hybrid spaces.
Hybrid spaces, meaning like both online and offline.
Exactly. These are environments that straddle the physical, isolated compound and the hyper-visible, hyper-connected digital realm.
Yeah, because Pearadise existed physically, but its recruitment, its marketing, its internal social currency, and eventually its downfall all played out online.
The irony of the internet in this story just hits you like a ton of bricks.
Oh, absolutely. TikTok acted as this brutal battleground that completely fractured the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
You had survivors and loyalists just screaming at each other in the comment sections of these viral videos.
It is chaos.
But at the exact same time, TikTok was the absolute lifeline. It was the only platform loud enough and structurally decentralized enough that it allowed the survivors to finally bypass Wilhelmie's filter and speak directly to the masses.
A traditional physical cult relies entirely on information control. The leader controls who you talk to, what you read, what you see.
Right, the classic compound model.
But social media platforms inherently disrupt that control through their architecture. Features like stitches, duets, and algorithmic recommendations, they democratize reality.
So the leader loses control of the narrative.
Instantly. Someone inside the Pearadise compound could post a video praising Wilhelmie's utopian vision, and a survivor on the outside could immediately stitch that video, appending their own traumatic experience and allegations of assault right onto the original piece of media. The closed loop of the high control group is suddenly pierced by millions of external data points.
But that doesn't make it a clean rescue operation. It makes it incredibly chaotic. You have people physically living this nightmare inside the compound, but then you have thousands of digital bystanders weighing in.
Which can be so damaging.
Yeah, you have internet sleuths taking sides, creating reaction videos, and essentially making viral entertainment out of someone else's active trauma. It turns a crisis into content.
Which raises massive questions about digital accountability. When an insular high-control group fractures publicly online, the platforms hold the power to expose the truth by amplifying whistleblower voices.
But they also obscure the truth, right?
Yes, through algorithmic chaos. Algorithms do not prioritize nuance or objective fact. They prioritize engagement and emotional polarity.
Anger gets clicks.
Exactly. So the digital footprint of Pearadise became a war zone of misinformation, loyalist defense campaigns, and traumatized whistleblowers. The truth became incredibly difficult for the casual observer to categorize.
Amidst all that digital noise, all the confusing back and forth, and the viral drama on TikTok, there was a devastating physical reality that finally, irreversibly shattered the illusion for everyone involved.
Yeah, we need to talk about cast parades.
We do.
The documentary handles the story of cast parades with profound sensitivity, avoiding the typical sensationalism you often see in the true crime genre.
Which I was really grateful for.
Me too. Cass was a community member who tragically passed away while part of Pearadise. Her death acted as the ultimate tragic tipping point.
The external scrutiny just skyrocketed after that.
It did, but more importantly, the internal illusion of safety was permanently broken. It forced both the insiders who were still desperately defending the community and the outsiders who were treating it like an internet soap opera to confront reality.
The very real, physical, and lethal consequences of Wilhelmie's unchecked authority. The sources emphasize that her story is used to illuminate the immense physical and psychological toll that these highly coercive environments demand. When you read about the survivor voices that spoke out in the wake of her death, it just stops you in your tracks.
It really is heartbreaking.
Because even after someone died, the survivors described feeling empowered and trapped at the exact same time. And I want to push back on the typical narrative here because it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to hear.
It challenges our assumptions.
Right. We want victims to hate their abusers 100% of the time. We want the narrative to be clean, like good versus evil, captive versus captor.
But it's never that simple.
It's not. The reality presented here is so profoundly human. These women admitted that they actually loved aspects of the community. They loved the genuine friendships they made with each other.
They cherished the moments of feeling beautiful, that initial relief of the oasis we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. And they held those feelings while simultaneously recognizing the extreme, life-threatening dangers of the environment.
This raises an important question about how society views and judges survivors of high-control groups.
Also,
The nuance you're pointing out, the fact that a victim can hold both the profound empowerment of sisterhood and the terror of entrapment in their mind at the same time, is exactly why this documentary is so important.
it shows that exploitation isn't black and white.
Exploitation is rarely linear. It is cyclical. It involves intense love bombing, genuine validation, and real moments of joy. Those joyful moments are then weaponized as leverage to enforce compliance when the abuse begins.
Because if you leave to escape the abuse, you also lose the only people who ever made you feel beautiful. You lose the sisterhood.
Precisely. If society only looks for the stereotypical, cartoonish, evil cult leader dynamic, we will completely miss the subtle, insidious ways modern manipulation operates.
And we'll end up blaming the victims.
Yes. The survivors of Paradise were not foolish and they were not weak. They were caught in an incredibly sophisticated psychological trap that fed them exactly what they had been starved of, while slowly and methodically draining them of their autonomy.
They were mourning the loss of the utopia they were promised, even as they were fleeing the nightmare it had come.
That is the tragedy of it all.
So what does this all mean? Having dissected the rise and the devastating fall of Paradise, having looked at the manipulation of language and the chaos of the internet, we have to ask the bigger question.
Which is,
Why was this community able to flourish in the first place? And what does it mean for the rest of us watching it unfold on our screens?
well, the societal critique at the heart of the Paradise documentary is inescapable. This compound didn't just appear out of thin air. It grew in a very specific fertile soil.
And what was that soil?
That soil was a broader culture that actively and persistently fails plus-size women.
Yeah, that part is so clear.
The stigma, the daily isolation, the lack of media representation, the systemic medical bias, the everyday cruelties, these are the societal gaps that Wilhelmy exploited.
He didn't have to invent the need for his community.
Not at all. Society had already created a massive, desperate need for sanctuary. He simply recognized the market for it and exploited the demand.
I really want to address you, the listener, directly on this point, because this entire story challenges all of us to look at our own communities.
It absolutely does.
If our society is constantly leaving vulnerable people, whoever they may be, out in the cold, aren't we inadvertently building the trap for the next paradise?
We are essentially doing the prep work for the next predator.
Right. If we don't provide genuine inclusion, genuine safety, and genuine respect for marginalized bodies and identities in our everyday lives, we are leaving the door wide open. Predators will happily fake those things in exchange for power, control, and devotion.
Watching an analysis of Big Girls Wanted, escaping Paradise forces a transition. We have to move from being passive consumers of true crime media to becoming active critics of our own social structures.
We have to demand better.
It demands that we reflect on how to build truly safe, inclusive spaces. And importantly, it teaches us the defining characteristic of a resilient space.
Which is what?
A truly safe space is one that cannot be easily co-opted by an individual seeking power. It relies on decentralized authority, extreme transparency, genuine accountability, and actions that consistently match the rhetoric.
You can't just have a charismatic leader with a great vocabulary of buzzwords.
No, because the vocabulary is the easiest part to fake.
That is such a crucial takeaway.
The series stands out in a very crowded true crime landscape because it refuses to just answer what happened to these women.
It goes so much deeper than that.
It demands that we understand why it happened, how it was executed through the hijacking of progressive language, and how the physical and digital worlds collided to expose it. It is a harrowing, cautionary tale, but it is also a clear, urgent call for vigilance.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground in this deep dive. We started by looking at the powerful, almost intoxicating allure of Paradise, that manufactured sanctuary that looked like a desperately needed oasis for women dying of societal thirst.
And we examined the chilling mechanics of concept creep.
Right, seeing how empowerment language, the very words meant to liberate people, were weaponized into invisible tools for coercive control.
We also navigated that complex hybrid battleground of the physical compound and the viral algorithmic chaos of TikTok.
We honored the tragic, tipping point reality of caste parades, exploring the deeply complex, non-linear experiences of the survivors who were forced to hold both love and terror at the same time.
And finally, we confronted the societal gaps that left the door open for this exploitation in the first place.
It is a heavy, complicated topic, but it is absolutely vital to understand. Community building is increasingly taking place in these complex, hybrid, and often unverified spaces.
We have to become much sharper at recognizing the difference between the performance of safety and the actual practice of safety.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own. We talked earlier about that craving for a space that aligns perfectly with your values, that beautiful oasis in the desert. But if our deepest, most fundamental human need for belonging makes us inherently vulnerable to the exact language designed to protect us, how do we build communities where safety is measured by ongoing actions, distributed power, and real accountability, rather than just the right vocabulary?
That is the million-dollar question.
How do you test the water in the oasis without losing the hope that genuine sanctuary actually exists? Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. Keep questioning everything, keep looking out for each other, and we'll catch you next time.